This is Johnny Cadillac, and today you're drinking at Moe's.
This is Drinkin at MWA, where we talk about the pros of pro wrestling in the Midwest while sipping on some brews with blessed beers and wrestling. That's my scene. Death matches and lucha libre, it's also mean. I'm a straight up smart goofball, not no kiss ass. I stand tall when it comes to wrestling. I'm the king. I know every move, every fling. Get ready for a wild time with Drinkin at MWA, where we don't quit. Drinkin at MWA, that's where it's at, like a power bomb. We hit hard, never flat. Fucking right, we're living the dream. Talking about wrestling, always a scream.
You know, I've always said here at Drinkinatmos, just because it says drinking at Moe's does not mean it has to be alcoholic. So I'm happy to say Drinking at Moe's is sponsored by Prince Nana Coffee. The exact same guy you see every week on Dynamite, on Collision. Yes, he has his own coffee, and it's freaking delicious. They don't even roast those beans until you've placed your order. And you might be telling me, hey, Big Mo, I'm more of a tea guy. They got you covered there too. Use the referral link in the description of this video. And let's get you dancing like Prince Nana with Prince Nana Coffee. All right, everybody. Welcome, Drinking at Moe's. Big Mo here. You know the drill. YouTube, like, subscribe, share, comment, all that good stuff. Because YouTube's algorithm is a pain in the ass. We are most places to find audio podcasts too. Today, I'm excited to have with me a guy that I have ran into a handful of times. We even got to work with each other once, but we won't go into that place because, people don't want to talk about that place anymore. But Johnny Cadillac, how you doing?
I am great. It is great to be on here making my drinking at Moe's debut. Ever since we agreed to meet up today, I've been really looking forward to this. So,
oh yeah, I've been looking forward to this one. I think, Lord, the last time we ran into each other was at Pupper Slam. That was a nice little show, benefiting some much deserved dogs needing a little love.
yeah, it was a great show to be a part of. I can safely say it's the first time I've ever worked a wrestling show that involved actual dogs. But it was a good cause, and it was a lot of fun that day.
Oh yeah, that was a great time, and pardon me if I was a little distracted over there. I leave the door to downstairs where I record open sometimes because I feel guilty about leaving my dog upstairs by himself. And well, I think after I get done recording with you tonight, I'm gonna have to make sure he gets a little extra water because I think he just knocked his water bowl down the stairs.
Oh no!
Oh well, but that stuff happens.
That mentions Pupper Slam.
Yeah, you know what? Funny enough, we were just talking about that. But the first thing I like to lead off with everybody with, especially their first time on, is what got you started as a fan, and then what got you, into the business.
No, absolutely. Wrestling has been a part of my life literally as long as I can remember. The story goes, and it's true, and I love saying it. My mom was in labor with me, and my dad was in the room watching wrestling. So that's how Johnny Cadillac got his start in this world, and I love saying that story when people are like, "Well, how long have you been? How long have you watched wrestling?" And I said, "Well, since the moment I was born." But it's been.
Oh, go ahead.
It's a unique answer. It's not one that you really hear every day by any means.
Oh, totally. I've asked this question to Lord close to, well, some people I've had on more than once, but close to 300 guests so far, and that is definitely a first. That is definitely a first
right.
For here. But no, I've heard, from a very young age before, but never like boom right out of the womb.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I like to say it makes me unique for sure, but
That
I
it
mean, so
does.
yeah, wrestling's been a part of my life all that I can remember, and my mom has taken like there's pictures of me like my dad holding me when I was a baby, and we're watching wrestling in the living room. So
Mm,
obviously, I don't remember those times, but it's always been a part of me. I feel I've watched enough of your episodes over the years, and I've heard the answer or the phrase enough through various wrestling people that I've known where there was that point in people's lives where they just kind of fell out of wrestling for a
yeah.
while. And that was never the case for me. It's always, there's been times where it was harder to watch, but it's something, it was always my first love in life. It was always a part of me and who I am. And so I knew growing up, it was initially my dream was to be a wrestler myself. I think any big diehard wrestling fans, it's always a dream, at least
Oh
as
yeah.
a child.
Oh yeah.
And of course, I had naysayers throughout my life. Oh, you'll never do something like that. And I eventually realized that I felt like I wasn't in good enough shape as a bigger guy to really focus on trying to be one of those in-ring wrestlers. But at the same time, I knew an insane amount of wrestling knowledge that
Mm.
maybe commentary was more of my thing. Um, I will say, going back, kind of getting ahead of myself, WCW is how I grew up. It was
Mm.
my parents asked me when Nitro started, hey, they thought there was a such thing as too much wrestling. So they said essentially pick between one company or the other. And well, WCW, I love what I saw at Nitro. Let's go with WCW. And they were especially grateful for that decision when the Attitude Era started in WWF.
I can imagine a lot of people, if they were in that similar situation, that the parents would have been very grateful for their kids picking WCW so as to not watch, everything from the DX crotch chops to the like Undertaker trying to embalm Stone Cold alive and stuff like that.
Exactly. So they were grateful for that, but eventually WCW went out of business, and I had that time period where, I mean, I guess right away WCW was kind of moving over to WWF under Shane McMahon with the Invasion era, and it took a lot of convincing for me to let my parents let me continue watching it. I said, I can't live life without wrestling, is how I felt, and so it was little bits and pieces here and there. We can watch it for a few minutes on a Monday night, but we weren't going to record it after it was time to go to bed or whatever else. And then there was these marquee matches. And I was like, I have to see that match, and if I can't stay up to watch it, I need to see it tomorrow. So eventually, I talked them baby steps, and
Yeah.
then the Invasion pay per view happens. And I said, Mom, Dad, like I need to see Invasion. We need to order this. And they said, oh no, 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 we're not spending our money on a WWF pay per view. And I said, but it's on my birthday. And that argument ended up winning. And so that was the first WWF pay per view we ordered. And the rest is history. I haven't stopped watching it since.
Wow. Yeah. I was trying to think. My first WWE pay per view that I ever watched as it was happening was actually WrestleMania 20.
Okay.
And yeah, that I was going through college before the Navy and had this group project. And one of the guys in my group was a wrestling fan. He's like, hey, they're showing WrestleMania at Hooters. You want to go? And I'm like, actually watch WrestleMania? Hell yeah, let's do this. So met up there, and then hell, even now my dog being nuts. I actually I don't know too many people that actually kept these around because, well, Lord knows the place it isn't around anymore. But I actually went to New York City, and back when they had that restaurant, and I still have the glass.
That is absolutely incredible. I love that.
And I've had those memories. I remember much like you, maybe not necessarily right out of the womb, but relatively young, remembering watching wrestling and growing up in, not so much practicing Catholic anymore, but growing up in a Catholic household, my parents wanting to go to Mass on Saturday evenings, and that being around the time before Nitro when it was WCW Saturday night. And I would always be like,
Yep.
I want to watch wrestling though. Yeah.
Oh, and I mean, and I grew up in a Christian family, so I definitely understand.
Oh yeah. And oh
And
good Lord. That much like I'm sure your parents were, mine tried to steer me away from especially WWE with, the DX era stuff, because I'll admit I probably got in a little bit of trouble once in a while of doing the eh,
right.
at an inappropriate time. I was like, well, crap. Okay.
Well, I will say this: incredible start to for WrestleMania 20 to be that first live pay per view you got to watch. That was a great show that night.
Oh yeah, and the thing, and I don't know if maybe this is just my memory playing tricks on me, but I do remember, before we go into some other stuff that you've been a part of, the what was it? The Undertaker Kane match
Yeah.
of that show, when you hear the oh yes, and then you see Undertaker come out, and that was right the first match back after Kane helped with that Buried Alive match. And I swear to God, it looked to me like Undertaker was walking in the ring with dirt on him.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know if that's my memory playing tricks on me, but I swear to God, every time I think about it, I swear I saw him with dirt on him. And I'm like, me thinking, dude, that's a cool little detail I don't know I would have thought about.
Well, it makes total sense too because the way they killed off the old Undertaker character up until that point was he lost the Buried Alive match. So to like
Mm-hmm.
come back with dirt, that makes total sense.
Yep. And, yeah, that was just a great show. And hell, going back to a version of the Undertaker that I'll admit, some of the early days of the Undertaker, especially going into also the Ministry of Darkness. The Ministry of Darkness in some of his early days, when I was around the age that those were happening, he scared the crap out of me.
Oh yeah, you weren't alone there.
Oh man, like I saw that the Nebraska Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame actually posted a a match card of a show that happened at the Pershing Auditorium in Lincoln. That was actually my first ever WWF show. My first ever pro wrestling show in general was that very show.
Um,
Tickets for Christmas. Dad got us floor seats. We were like maybe less than 10 rows from the ring. We were like right near the entrance.
okay.
And one of my favorites at the time, Big Boss Man, went up against Yokozuna. And I'm like standing there at the entrance, this little third grader. And here comes giant Yokozuna walking by me. I'm like, jaw
Yeah.
on the floor. Yeah.
Oh man. So anyway, if you don't mind to go back to your question, as far
Oh,
as
yeah.
getting into the wrestling business, I I was in college and my focus was I wanted to get a degree in broadcast journalism because I felt that was probably my gateway to landing some sort of wrestling announcing job. And there was a backyard group meeting here in Lincoln at the time that a new friend of mine, had started going to. And the first day he was there, he says, I have a friend who's in college right now studying broadcasting, wanting to be a wrestling announcer. Could we bring him in here? And they said, well, right now we only have wrestlers doing our commentary, so we'd love to have somebody who was exclusively here to do commentary. So I was there the very next week, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. And eventually, I did that for a year or two, and then the group folded. And I thought, I went on, I got my college degree, and I felt at a certain point that broadcasting, or especially like wrestling work, was just done for me. That it wasn't in the cards weren't in my future. Well, there was a wrestler in that backyard group who, and he reaches out to me. I see him posting flyers for the upcoming MWA cage match, and I said, "Ooh, that sounds like an interesting show. I have plans that night, but that would be kind of cool to go to."
Yeah.
2 days before the show, Kid Kamikaze reaches out to me. He goes, "How would you feel about ring announcing this Friday?" And I said, "I've never ring announced before." And I thought about it, and I said, "Well, I really thought my wrestling future was dead. This is a new opportunity. Maybe I'll enjoy ring announcing. Maybe that'll be something I could be decent at." And it was just I had plans to go to Sioux City, Iowa, to hang out with a couple friends, and I reached out to my friend and I said, "So this possible ring announcing gig just came up for me the day that I'm supposed to head up there. What should I do?" And he goes, "You need to be at that show. Like, you don't know if you'll get another opportunity like this. Go to that show." And so I went, and I fell in love with wrestling. Not with wrestling. I always loved wrestling, but I fell in love with ring announcing. And apparently I had kind of a knack for it. And so the next time MWA was in Lincoln, I reached out to the promoter and I said, "Would you be interested in letting me show up again at that next Lincoln show?" He goes, "Yep." And that was in so my first show with them was in the fall of 2017, and that next show was a few months later. And I've been with MWA ever since, still ring announcing, still loving what I do. The time just flies by, but
oh yeah, time like they say, time flies when you're having fun, and you know you're having a great time with the ring announcing. I know, it's been a while since I've been to an MWA show, but the couple that I do remember going to, not only were you ring announcer, but you also were playing kind of a heelish general manager type of role.
Commissioner.
You're still doing that.
I'm not a heel anymore.
Not a heel anymore.
But yeah,
I know at the time you were.
Yeah, I am still. It's easy for the ring announcer to be able to make announcements, and so it was a foregone conclusion for MWA. Like, let's let Johnny Cadillac take the wheel of commissioner, and I haven't given it up since. And so it was some controversial calls, and the crowd wasn't happy with me with one show, and I'm innocently getting booed over a decision I had to make because I think the referee screwed up in the finish of a match, and we had to call it this way. The crowd wanted the match to keep going, and I said, "No, we got to get on to our next match." And so they didn't like me for it, so they started booing me. And instead of just feeling sorry for myself, instead of wondering why the crowd turned on me and how am I supposed to ring announce the rest of the show, I told myself, I said, if this crowd's going to hate me, let me give them a reason to hate me. So I started talking back to them. And it didn't work out as well at first, but I was loving every second of it. And eventually everything caught on, and Johnny Cadillac was a full-blown heel commissioner and ring announcer. And I recently turned face a couple MWA shows ago. I would say was my official face turn when my longtime nemesis Christian Temple was getting a championship match against Brian Blade, and I kind of opened my eyes and I said, Doomsday's been running too much roughshod around here. They've been taking advantage of me being the commissioner and my best friend the Sieve, and I said, I can't allow for this anymore. So I rejected the Sieve's hugs. I banned Doomsday from ringside, and I sat front row as Christian Temple defeated Brian Blade, becoming the new MWA champion. And I had gained a new level of respect for Christian Temple at that point, especially. I started gaining that respect after I actually had a match with Christian Temple. Uh, but it opened my eyes all the more, and now Johnny Cadillac's the face in MWA, and we'll
Hey,
see where it goes from here.
all right. Yeah, that sounds like a lot. Like I know Doomsday, they had been kind of, like you said, running roughshod around there. So, getting to see the heels get their comeuppance, I guess, is always a good thing. Always, what the fans like to see. The good prevail there.
Yeah.
Um, but it got me thinking. A lot of people when they think of pro wrestling shows and the pro wrestling business in general, making sure my kid isn't getting too out of hand here, but
Right.
the non-wrestling aspects of it, they obviously, you got the in-ring product, which is supposed to be the center of it, everybody's attention, but some of those non-wrestling aspects are just as important. The good ring announcers, if you're gonna have commentary, good commentators, you
Oh
know
yeah.
going all the way to the people running the video cameras and all that, making sure everything's in place. A lot goes into those wow, words are hard. A lot goes into putting a show together that a lot of people probably don't think about.
Oh yeah. No, and I'm not gonna just say this because I am a ring announcer, but those production roles that any wrestling company needs, those are the unsung heroes a lot of times. Those are the ones that people don't realize that they, provide the some of the I think JR said that, they provide the lyrics to a song, and it really, I mean, it's a thankless job, but I try to make the most of what I do. And regardless if I'm just going there and I'm doing the typical ring announcer work, which I still love doing that. And I love being able to use my voice. Like God gave me a loud voice for a reason.
Mm.
And so I love being able to do that. Or if I have more of a character and I'm coming in and I'm pissing people off or I'm making them happy or whatever my role is, I'm gonna make the most of it. I love doing that. And it's when I have people buying a Johnny Cadillac 8x10, when I have people buying a Johnny Cadillac t shirt, it means the world to me that like somehow I'm being noticed because the show's not about me. The show's about the in ring work and the wrestling. But to be able to see some people and some fans, like even signing an autograph means the world to me. That I'm making a difference in somebody's life for just a couple hours in the night,
Oh
just
yeah.
based on doing my job. But
Oh yeah.
it's yeah, no, I can't say enough good things about those unsung heroes, because they really do make a difference.
Oh yeah. And it goes like the entire show when it's done. You again, words are hard. Trying to keep track of everything here, but wrestling is meant to be, it's entertainment. It's an escape.
Yeah,
You could have somebody in that crowd that just having an absolute crap day up until the point where they end up going to the show and they making sure my son here is not gonna, but you know they're having that crap day, and when they step into those doors, you know they're enjoying the show. They're
yeah,
forget everything from that crap day is just outside those doors, and for that little bit of time there, they're not worried about any of it. And that's one of my things about the magic of a pro wrestling show is, hell, I know I've had my moments where having a crap day, I turn on wrestling and just get caught up in the stories and watching a lot of the action in the ring. Like I gravitate toward a lot of the intense personas, and when hell, recently on TV, getting to see the return of Samoa Joe and just seeing the look on his face like he's gonna go rip that guy's head off. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, something just gets that excitement going. So definitely, hell, the ring announcers going into that. I mean, she's not there anymore, but one that definitely brought that in the ring announcing role, Samantha Irvin.
Oh, I agree.
Oh man, just the way she got into it and some of the special ways that she would announce different people, like, oh, the one that always gets me laughing, Chelsea Green.
Well, and to this day, Samantha Irvin's not there anymore. But to this day, the ring announcer still has to introduce Chelsea Green that way because of what Samantha Irvin did that at that time.
Oh God, yeah, and it's like if somebody were to try to not do that, people would be hounding whoever the ring announcer was. Like, man, why can't you do it like her?
I mean, and then Chelsea Green makes the most of it too. Like I was watching one of those like press conferences before at one of the Saudi Arabia pay-per-views or something, and or some sort of pay-per-view, and Michael Cole introduced Chelsea Green, and she goes, "No, no, do it right." And Michael Cole, being the man he is, and then have to do this like squealy, obnoxious woman announcement of Chelsea Green, and did an absolute terrible job at it. But oh man, had the biggest smile on my face just watching it.
Oh man, yeah, I get a kick out of it. And oh God, what's the other one? Oh, when she'd announce Gunter,
Yeah.
the way she announced him was like, she just like, she put something into it.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta love it. Now
Yeah.
another thing that you're in is you also, hey, you're on Drinkin' MWA, but you have your own podcast.
I do.
How has that been going lately? Because I mean, I try to keep up as much as I can, but with new son and the schedule that I've been keeping. Well, I love my Dr. Pepper, but it gives me the burps like crazy. But I don't get to keep up as much as I might like to. But I know you've got a steady group of people coming through your show. How's it been going?
It has rough shots at times. There's times where, and honestly, I will, Big Mo, I'll give you credit because like seeing the consistency of your podcast and having all these interviews booked as often as you do keeps me motivated too, because it's so easy to just hit a down step and feel like you need to take a break, and sometimes I take those breaks more often than I should, for something I was doing once a week when I first started. And then when you get into the rhythm of taking that break, and then it can take a lot to have enough motivation to bring it back. And so at this point, I haven't, for various reasons, I haven't had an episode in 2025 yet. I have a couple that I have scheduled for the next week, in the books. So hopefully things change. I had a couple at the very end of 2024. So I finally kind of got enough of a groove back. But it can be challenging, but it's so rewarding too. I've had people who just heard about my podcast from a friend, or they had a friend who guested on my podcast, and all of a sudden I've had people say, "Are you Johnny Cadillac?" And yes, I am. And they hadn't seen my work as like a ring announcer, but they say, "I really enjoy your podcast," and that means the world to me to know that my podcast is really making a difference in people's lives, and it gives me encouragement and it gives me motivation too.
Oh yeah, no, there is something about that. Like, I know similarly when I've had, I've been recognized at a show, and I'm like, somebody comes up and like, "You Big Mo drinking?" I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "Oh, dude," and I'm like, "Oh, all right." And I even had that happen at the zoo here in Omaha. I was with my family, with my wife, and all of a sudden somebody sees me and they're like, "Hey," and I'm like, and talk to them for a second, and when my wife was like, "What the heck was that?" They're like, "Oh, they recognized me from," and then telling my parents that, and just the sometimes I feel like they would think, with the podcast, oh, that little thing that he's doing, but then they just got this smile on their face, like, oh wow, this is. I'm like, wow, that was something. But
Yeah, no. So
it is that
let,
sense of motivation for sure.
yeah, let me tell you, if you don't mind, I want to tell you a quick story. Is so I worked
Absolutely.
part time in radio. I worked part time in radio, and I for a while I was producing a regular weekday afternoon radio show, and so that was kind of it was through that job through radio that got me into podcasting in the first place. It was something that my boss there encouraged me. He goes, we have a market here for wrestling fans. Hands down, we think we know that you would be our number one person to kind of provide us for something in that market to our listeners. So he was the one who started the ball rolling with me, and then I took it and ran where I could. And there was one period where WWE was getting ready to do like a Raw or SmackDown in Lincoln, and they WWE reached out to Broadcast House about a possibility of doing like a podcast or a radio show or something, and they mentioned my podcast. And to be honest, I was excited for the opportunity, but I tried not to think too much into it, and I failed at doing so because they turned my podcast down, and it hurt for and I tried not to get worked up over it. It was a huge opportunity. Sometimes in life, you just miss out on opportunities. At least I tried. We got my name out
Yeah.
there, and but I that was one of those low spots, and I said, okay, what's next? What can I do? And I worked. I think it was the first or second time I worked down in Junction City for TAPW, traditional American Pro Wrestling, and there was a fan there at the time who is now wrestles for him under the name of Zachariah Creed,
Mm.
who he came to me and he said, "You're Johnny Cadillac, right?" And I said, "Yeah," and I had no idea who this guy was, and he goes, "I love your podcast. I got a friend of mine into your podcast. He's blind, and he listens to it every week. And he says that you do such a good job that he can envision everything you're talking about, even though he can't physically see." And just hearing those stories from somebody I didn't know at the time, and I had a couple other people reach out to me during that same night because I had the wrestling coach Luis Cabral interview. So they did, and then if they wanted to keep listening to my podcast from there or they didn't, that was up to them. But the ones who continued to listen to it were giving me compliments, and that was a spark I needed. That I kind of revived myself from that slump that WWE said no, and I said I still have a following. I got to take care of those people because they appreciate me.
Oh yeah, no,
It was incredible.
oh yeah, no, I've definitely had some of those moments myself where somebody that I would be excited about, and thankfully I've had more people, especially more towards the beginning, that kind of just didn't answer. That was kind of the low point, like, oh, I was excited, but
Yeah,
then to go from there to some of the opportunities that I've had from Warrior Wrestling when they did their stop in St. Louis, and walking up to the guy going back by Bronson Reed now and thinking, oh, this is going to be a long shot, to him actually taking time with me. Like, he set out after the Fan Fest and in the block of time where he's like, okay, let's go. And I'm like thinking to myself, holy crap. Or having one of, me being, fan of that intense style, yeah, I do like a lot of the death matches, and having one of my favorite guys on, John Wayne Murdoch, and him actually telling me he doesn't do a lot of podcasts anymore, but he will do mine, was just like, oh my God.
Oh, that's
Little
humbling. That's
stuff
very
like that,
humbling.
for sure.
Yeah.
Now, okay, there's a couple last things before I get into my two categories here.
Okay.
That one I'm kind of curious about because um, I see a lot on some of the Facebook about a like different virtual, you know, friends like Royal Rumble sort of things. I'm kind of
Yeah.
curious, one, where the idea came about for it, and how does it work?
It's I had a buddy, shout out to my friend Marcus Jones, who kind of years ago, I believe at the time WWE was still only doing one Royal Rumble. It was only the men's Royal Rumble. And he says, I want 30 of my friends, whoever wants to be involved, let me know. Pick what entry number you think is going to win the Royal Rumble. And I'm going to do this whole thing where, and then if a spot's already taken, give me a different number. Let's get 30 people involved. And I don't know if he ended up having to pick a couple of his friends for him. I was the very first person to comment on that post. This is 2016. And I knew the way things were with Roman Reigns as a champion. I said, it's got to be Triple H who wins that Royal Rumble. He's got to be a surprise entry because it's the Authority. He's going to come out as entry number 30. So I was quick to comment on his post, and I said, "Give me entry number 30." And so I won that Royal Rumble of his, and by being the first person to comment on it, and he did that for a couple years, and I was just like, I love this. And so I kind of started my own thing similarly. I made just a generic Facebook post one day, and I think this at this point, the women's Royal Rumble was a part of the Royal Rumble as well. And I said, give me an entry number for each Rumble, and we'll put you in. And I had people reaching out and left and right wanting to be in, and I think I ended up having to throw in a couple of my friends. So it was a matter of okay, however, the entry number you pick, whatever is an entrant in the actual WWE Royal Rumble, you're that representing that person, and we'll see who wins based on the actual WWE Royal Rumble. And
Mm.
so I just was doing basic things like that, and then it was I wanted to have a little more say in who I had involved, and so then I'm starting to the next year I'm picking the 30 people, and my friend shout out to Des Lorene that I know through the Jericho Cruise, at the time especially was picking on me left and right about absolutely everything. We had this internet rivalry going on for quite a while. And so he was the very first person I announced, and I was like, I'll give him a random entry number. And so every person I announced after that, I said, their mission in these rumbles is to eliminate Dez. I don't care if win or lose, I don't care. Just make sure Dez is eliminated. And that was in 2021, where I think WWE backstage announced that it was supposed to be Randy Orton was entry number one and Edge was entry number two. And then Royal Rumble happens, and those two spots somehow switch. But I
Mm.
already had Dez announced as entry number two. So the fact that he made it all the way to the end as Randy Orton, who was then eliminated by Edge, who he should have had in the first place, I was like, this is great. And so it was one of those things that like really I used to get my friends and my Facebook following and the people I tried. And the nice thing with the Royal Rumble, especially with there being two Rumbles in this year, I'm not letting anybody be in both Rumbles. So I have 60
Mm.
different people involved because it ultimately it builds more excitement about the actual Royal Rumble, the actual WWE pay per view, and because people want to see how they're gonna do, and so that it gets them more excited for the actual show for that reason, and
Oh
so
yeah.
I think that same year where in 2021 where I was really building up that Royal Rumble and all the trash talking that my friends were doing with each other over something they actually had no control over the outcome in. And I just loved stirring the pot and I loved like putting the publicity on it that it just became a thing. So this time of year, my mind goes crazy with virtual pay-per-view anythings, but it's something I start with. I actually start with Survivor Series because War Games became a whole new
Uh,
thing where I wanted to pin two of my friends against each other as captains and pick their teams. And then Royal Rumble is kind of a new fresh start. And then, but I do the whole pay per view where I put people in the match card based in the WWE pay per view. So Kevin Owens versus Roman Reigns, I'll have Tony Riccadelli against Brandon Christie and just make a whole post out of it. It's a lot of work on my end, and I give all the statistics. In the Royal Rumble matches, I'll say Johnny Cadillac was just eliminated by Grant Morrison or whatever else, based on how it is. Like I list the order of elimination, the order of entries, who each person was eliminated by in the virtual world. A lot of work, but so much fun, and I keep it going through whatever pay per view they have after WrestleMania, and then so normally, Backlash, sometimes it's been like
yeah.
United Champions or whatever else, but that's where I keep it going through. And then I take a break and I enjoy wrestling for just the wrestling the rest of the year until Survivor Series comes around again. But it
Oh,
really it's a lot of fun for me. It's probably more fun for me than it is for anybody else. But it's a way to really boost conversation amongst me
hey.
and a lot of friends. And then sometimes like I'm all about me as a person. I'm all about building people up where I can.
Mm.
On Facebook, I'm doing Legend of the Week posts every week. And it's really to just build people up, especially if they're hitting a slump or if they're really going above and beyond looking out for me and I feel like I don't thank them enough. Well, here's recognition for my entire Facebook following to see that. And so it's really it's a double, not a double standard, but there's multiple motivations behind what I do.
I got you. Yeah, it all sounds like a pretty great thing. You getting a lot of people together around different times of year. I can dig
Yeah,
that. I can definitely dig that. And, it's definitely kind of fits in the, the fantasy football, fantasy baseball s
oh
sort
yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
Very cool. Now, you brought up the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about, the Jericho Cruise. Now,
Yes.
I've been curious about going a few times. Never did end up getting around to going. I know I had somebody on a while back. They've been going to multiple themselves, and we, oh God, what was it? I think it was the fifth one where we were joking around that, man, they really missed out on calling it Cinco de Jericho.
Oh,
But
it,
how's it been for you going to those? Because I hear they're a pretty good time.
well, I'm gonna first give a shout out to Jericho Cruise 4, which initially was supposed to be over St. Patrick's Day. So they called it the Jericho Cruise 4 Leaf Clover
Mm.
because COVID was still a thing at the time. No, COVID was still lingering, but it was because they had to push back Jericho Cruise 3 before that. There wasn't enough time between the two cruises to really book, get enough, um, you know, vacationers, enough wrestling fans to book that cruise and get it all paid off in time. So they had to push back the fourth Jericho cruise till I think October or something, October, November. Or no, it was a following next year. It was a whole year they pushed it back. And so it was like following January or February, but they still called it the 4 Leaf Clover because initially it was supposed to be over St. Patrick's Day. So
Mm.
that still worked out to what you were saying there. Um, I have been on the Jericho cruise since the start. The first Jericho cruise, I that was my first ever cruise in general going on, and for me, it was my buddy Ryan Johnson and I. We were wanting to take a trip. We'd already done WrestleMania. We went to WrestleMania 32 together in Dallas, and we're like, okay, what do we want to do now? And so we were talking SummerSlam, and so at the time, SummerSlam was always in Brooklyn, and so that was the plan. But then I went and I had to take out a loan to buy a car. And I said, I told Ryan, I said, we need to take a trip. But I don't know if SummerSlam's in the picture because, SummerSlam weekend itself is going to be expensive. It's in New York. So everything, like price wise, is going to be astronomical. We're going to have to pay for all our meals, our flights, everything. Maybe let's have something in mind on the back burner to
Yeah.
have as an alternative vacation. And at the time, I was a very active listener in the Talk is Jericho podcast,
Mm.
and Jericho was talking about this new concept that he was doing of his own cruise, mixing all the worlds of Chris Jericho into one event. Because Fozzy had done the Kiss cruise, and that's really what started the
That
ball rolling.
sparked the idea. I remember that.
And so every time I listened to that on the podcast, it was in one of my ears and out the others. And they were talking about all these wrestlers that were going to be on it: Mick Foley, Diamond Dallas Page, Ring of Honor was the wrestlers of Ring of Honor were going to be doing a
That first one, yeah.
championship, yeah. And I just didn't really think about it. And then there was one day after I told Ryan about a possible alternative vacation, I said, "Wait a minute, this might be it." And at the time, I had another buddy who just recommended cruises in general to me, and I already had it on my bucket list to go on a cruise at some point during my lifetime. And and then I started looking at the prices on the for the Jericho cruise, the fact that all the meals were included, and I presented it to Ryan. I said, "This might be a possible alternative trip." And we got together that night, and by the end of the night, we said, "Forget SummerSlam. Let's try this Jericho cruise thing. It's never been done before. We'll be making history." And that's what we did. And we made it a point of watching SummerSlam together that year. And it ended up not being our favorite SummerSlam by any means. And then we went on the Jericho cruise, and we immediately said that was the right decision. So at the time of this recording, Jericho Cruise 6 on the beach, is 8 days away. And I'm going to be on Jericho Cruise 6. I have been on all 6 of them up to this point. Um, I don't know how long I can say every Jericho cruise is a cruise I've been on, but I've developed a whole nother family just through the cruise. Shout out to Drinking at Mo's 300th episode with Cheeseburger. That is how I met Cheeseburger. Was the first Jericho cruise. He was in that Sea of Honor tournament, and then I was just a fan. I got his autograph. That was a big deal to me. Cheeseburger was actually one of the talent I saw more on that cruise than anybody else. Cheeseburger and Beer City Bruiser, and the fact that years later I've been able to work with both of them. They're both Drinking at Mo alumni, and um, and I just blows my mind to think about. But and then it was just through friends I continued to make on the Jericho cruise. We started these Zoom calls. My friend, shout out to Taryn Lee, was getting really popular on Instagram, just being a woman wrestling fan, and who knew some of the right wrestlers, knew Joey Janela. And so that started her friendship with Cheeseburger. And through that started my friendship with Cheeseburger. And so the fact that, all full circle, and I have the Jericho cruise to thank for all of it.
It does seem to. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I will say any day, if you're a dedicated wrestling fan, and especially if you're even toying the idea of going on a cruise in general, the Jericho cruise I will highly recommend. I don't make a lot of money otherwise, but there's payment plans, so it can really be affordable too. Definitely, always something I'd recommend to wrestling fans.
Oh yeah, and it definitely does seem to bring rather eclectic groups of people together, which I love to see. Which, professional wrestling in general seems to really bring like an eclectic group together. Like, not a lot of other things can say they can. That's pretty cool when you think about it. Now, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. The Jericho Cruise came at the absolute right time. This was a month and a half after the first All In pay-per-view, where it really put indie wrestling on the map, just with Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks saying, "Hey, we're independent wrestlers. Let's go sell out a major arena." And they did. And then, Jericho dresses up as Pentagon that night and attacks Kenny Omega, and then says, "See you on the Jericho Cruise." And me, who was already like counting down the days from the moment we signed up for that cruise, got all the more excited to see that moment live. And it came at absolutely the right time. That's kind of what started but really put a boost and starting AEW was like all these big names in the independent scene coming together for the common cause, and it just the snowball effect. So,
Oh yeah, totally. Now on to my two categories that I round stuff off with here,
yeah.
and thinking about it, I like to try to theme it towards the guests as much as possible. So each of these people involved with the Jericho Cruise at one point or another.
Okay.
And well, one of them maybe not. And I include him because he's just one of my personal favorites that I always try to talk about him. But first off, a guy that, well, hell, I was sure excited to see was gonna be on this Jericho Cruise that you'll be going on next week. Recently won himself a title. Say his name and he appears. Yeah, I'm talking about Joe Hendry.
I was not expecting Joe Hendry to be announced for the Jericho Cruise. Everything with that TNA has been doing with NXT and WWE, and I've been the first time I ever saw a Joe Hendry clip, I thought it was the stupidest thing I saw. And
Same thing.
And somehow I watched Bound for Glory live that year, and because I don't watch TNA as often as I should. But Joe Hendry debuts in the Collier shot Gauntlet, and at that moment, something clicked in me, and the crowd was loving his theme song, and they're waving their hands back and forth, and I was like, "This is super cheesy,
And
but
I
it's
love it.
fun." Yeah, and
Yeah.
and then Joe Hendry like developed that he did on his own, developed this huge cult following, and I was an instant fan. And then I went back and watched those videos I once thought were super really seeing Joe Hendry start. And so I didn't think I was waiting for all just these AEW names to be announced for this Jericho Cruise. And then they said, say his name and he appears. Joe Hendry's on the cruise. And what? Yes, yes. And I'm really excited. He's going to have a concert on the cruise that they booked for. It's going to be so much fun to be a part of. I hope to be able to meet him on there. I'm excited.
Well, I'm little jealous of you on that one. That's a guy I definitely want to meet. Next up, a guy that I actually have met before, and up top here, I got a bunch of my autograph figures and stuff.
Yeah,
got one of this guy, and you better not speak ill of him, or you'll be cursed. Danhausen.
So Danhausen's done a couple Jericho cruises, and the first time he was on the Jericho cruise, I had heard of him, and I didn't know much about him, and I did not. Similar to Joe Hendry, I did not see what the big deal was about him, why people loved him so much, and so a lot of the Jericho cruises. The last wrestling match takes place on the ship is whatever the match Chris Jericho signed up for. And this in particular one, I don't remember. I believe I want to say, yeah, Jericho teamed with Orange Cassidy that night.
Yeah.
And I maybe no, it wasn't the Guns. I can't remember who their opponents were off the top of my head. But it was that marquee match that really was drawing people in, and then there's these moments that happen on the ship that's just there for that cruise audience, because they're not televised hardly at all. The first couple Jericho cruises we had some TV experience, but now it's just something solely for the cruisers to enjoy. And on this particular cruise, just about everybody had the alcohol package on the cruise.
I know I would be.
Yeah. Well, at the time, this was the third Jericho cruise. We were still in a pandemic. It was the very first cruise that Norwegian put on coming out of the pandemic, and so the restrictions were insane. but naturally the sales were down. So they had it where they said, okay, if you the alcohol package, the soda package, whatever you want, it will be for free as long as you pay the gratuity for it. So what would normally be a nearly $400 alcohol package was available to everyone for $80. And so just about everyone on that ship had the alcohol package.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was, again, there was restrictions. We all had to be vaccinated to go on that cruise. So at the time, the vaccine wasn't available for minors yet. So I think there was one or two minors on the cruise, but otherwise, everyone was an adult. So there was no worry about the age limit for getting the alcohol, and so everyone has the alcohol package. And Danhausen comes and saves the day. There's a attack after that tag team match, and they have this feel good moment on in the ring, and Danhausen picks up the mic and he goes, "Hey, I took Chris Jericho's credit card and I went and bought shots of tequila for everybody here," and so then they came around with shots of tequila for everyone, and I was laughing because I was like, "Oh yeah, you used Jericho's credit card for something that was already paid for." um, but yeah, he was just so much fun. I didn't get enough Danhausen experience on that cruise other than that wrestling show. So he came back. He signed with AEW, and so he was back on the very next Jericho cruise. He did one of those photo ops on there. So I got to meet Danhausen. He got my picture taken with him. You know, we did that whole curse on the on the for the picture, and a lot of fun.
Human monies.
Yeah. Danhausen's a character, but he's always over.
Oh yeah. I actually, up top there with my autograph stuff, I actually have the ringside exclusive figure signed, and he started to do little art things on there.
Oh,
so I got that, and I actually ended up getting one of the AEW trading cards of his signed, so I got that up there too. So that's been fun, and yes, definitely a character that, I don't know, some people talk about, some of the comedic centric characters, if something about if you're funny, not making money, something like that. But that dude, he's him and R-Truth gold.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
All right. Last but not least here, well, this one I'm curious about, because I've heard good and I've heard bad about people meeting this guy. And I might need to break out a little math. Steiner math, yeah. Scott Steiner.
I haven't met Scott Steiner yet. He is on this upcoming Jericho cruise. And so he's one of the legends on there. There's a photo opportunity you can do with him. He's on one of the episodes of Talk is Jericho that's going to be airing on the cruise, or hosted on the cruise. So it'll be interesting to see how he is. I'm one of those people, when you talk about Scott Steiner, the first thing I tend to think about is the Steiner brothers tag team in like the early to mid 90s before he turned on Rick and went to the NWO.
The Michigan jackets and stuff.
Yeah, but those guys, they were ahead of their time. And you look at teams like American Made now and everything Chad Gable's done. And I think that's why when Chad Gable first teamed with Jason Jordan, they were American Alpha. They reminded me so much of the Steiner brothers that got me to be a fan of that tag team. I mean, they went on to interesting things. And I mean, Chad Gable's a very underrated star in WWE now. But it's just seeing not the simplicity, but what they do with the suplexes and, Steiner brothers, Kurt Angle, and those who really excelled in making a suplex look really good and devastating. And that's what I think about with the Steiners first. And then you can't talk about Scott Steiner without going much further before you bring up Steiner math, as you brought up. And like one of the most famous wrestling promos of all time, dare I say, probably the number one TNA promo, like number two being some of Jay Lethal's work as Black Machismo.
Oh yeah. Yep, I would have to agree. Yeah, that Steiner math people still quoting it to this day. And then,
Most
yeah,
definitely.
Jay Lethal with some of his Black Machismo stuff, or the woo off with Ric
Yeah.
Flair.
Well, when I said that, I was thinking Black Machismo, but I was like, no, that was Jay Lethal as Ric Flair. It wasn't Macho Man.
Yep, yep. All right. Now I got some random questions. Some probably wrestling related. Some might not be.
Okay.
Some nothing to do with anything we've talked about so far.
Sounds good.
So first off, craziest in match moment that you've been there to witness.
Oh, man. And this, I mean, would this be the big time scene, or is it like a show that I worked, or just
It could be one that you worked, or it could be one that you were just there in the crowd and there was a moment that you were just like, holy shit.
I think I don't know if it would be the craziest, but one of those shows I was a part of in Omaha was when Jeff Hardy had his pyro go off on him on SmackDown. And
Uh,
I was just so used to that pyro being so loud, so I'm just a fan in the audience being like, brace yourself, there's about to be an explosion, and it was extra loud. And then afterwards you see Jeff Hardy like on the ground, and I'm like, what just happened? And then come to find out is it exploded all around him, and I was like, okay, definitely wasn't expecting that.
oh god, yeah. And to think of some of the mishaps that have happened around pyro, especially with WWE shows, Undertaker being a very famous example where he
Oh
got
yeah.
like severely burned. Thing was
Yep.
an elimination chamber, if I
Yep.
remember right.
Yeah. In
Yeah.
2010, I believe that was.
Yep. And speaking of, well, this isn't a crazy moment that I've witnessed, but speaking of elimination chamber, I actually have a DVD cover of an elimination chamber signed, and it's the one with Edge on the cover where it looks like he's biting the cage.
Okay.
I have that one signed by Edge.
That's awesome.
Yep, I got it framed. I'm just waiting to figure out where the hell I'm gonna put it.
Right. No, I know that problem all too well, where you have like these cool things that need to go up, and you're like, where do I have the room now?
Oh yeah, that's why my wife got me this. But some of the, like I have said, I am a fan of those intense personas, intense match types. So yeah, I've been there to witness a fair share of crazy moments from, oh god, my first ever death match live and seeing them light glass on fire, to being there at a Revolver show for their Cage of Horror show and seeing fire involved twice, to some of the other people that I've had on that have talked about crazy moments from the original ECW and getting told to be careful with the venue in a match against New Jack. And then they both proceed to go through a wall and
Yeah.
Paul Heyman screaming at them after. Or the one that always jumps into my head because it happened not all that long ago, as far as the guy telling me the story, but he goes to Puerto Rico periodically, and Puerto Rican crowd very passionate about their
Yeah.
wrestling.
Yeah.
And we've all heard some of the stories of stuff getting thrown, people getting attacked, this and that. Well, this guy ended up wearing a shirt to the ring that said in English and in Spanish, "Justice for Brody." And I just, when he told me that, I'm like, oh shit. Knowing the whole thing with Bruiser Brody down there, and like,
Yeah.
oh god. And he told me that some of the people that were in the crowd that night had called the promoter to tell him that if that guy ever comes back, he's not making it home.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard stories about the Puerto Rico crowd too. And I haven't been to Puerto Rico, but I've heard enough stories that I can only imagine that when you're telling me this, I'm like, I have the picture in my head. I can see it happening. Like they're a whole nother breed of animals down there.
Oh, God. And you know what? I have nothing but respect for it because, going back, we talked a little bit about backlash, the Puerto Rico backlash that they had.
Yeah.
Bad Bunny coming out there. I get goosebumps just talking about the way the crowd reacted when that music hit and those lyrics started going. And they're literally word for word along with it as he's walking to the ring. It's something that you didn't really see a whole lot of before that. And it's like the amount of uh, overseas PLEs now, I guess is what they call them. The amount of them that they've done after that, it's like that show was there and they showed them, hey, maybe we need to do more of these.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And I mean it's one of those things where um again, I didn't watch a lot of WWF growing up, but I can safely say that I have never seen that much of an ovation or appreciation for Savio Vega than I did that night at Backlash.
Oh God, that was something else. Only reaction I've ever seen that even comes close to maybe beating that was the reaction the crowd in France had during the introductions to AJ Styles' match, where the camera is literally bouncing because of
Yeah,
the crowd.
yeah.
All right, now on to the next question. We are on the heels of the next Super Bowl, one of the biggest eating days of the year. I know I have my favorite foods in general, but especially, when thinking about the Super Bowl. What is a favorite food of yours?
I mean, with Super Bowl and Super Bowl parties, I think the one thing I could think of that would really go good for a Super Bowl party and everything, because chips is like a common thing, but queso dip is a world's difference, and like that'd be at the top of that list for me. I love queso dip.
So, yeah, queso dips up there. I know somebody recently brought up hot wings.
Yeah,
I could tear through some damn hot wings.
I mean, I think if I think of like a traditional, like a good traditional Super Bowl party when it comes to food alone, I'm gonna think of queso dip and smoked weenies before anything else.
That I can agree with you there. Those two classics. All right, now I haven't got to watch as many movies lately, but I definitely have my favorites. Some of like all time, like, oh God, speaking of right behind me, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2: Secret of the Ooze. Probably one of my favorite movies ever. What is a favorite movie of yours?
My go-to answer every time: Step Brothers.
Oh, classic,
I love it.
classic. Oh my
Yeah,
God. Yeah. Oh God. Hell, I was just quoting some of that the other day.
and that's part of the reason why I love it so much. It's so quotable. Like I'll find myself hanging out with just about anybody, and I'll just randomly be like, "Did we just become best friends? Want to do
Oh,
karate in the garage together?" Or like just all these different quotes, and then we'll go back and forth doing Step Brothers quotes, and it's just like that moment where like
mm.
either there's the possibility where you do one of those Step Brother quotes, and whoever you're talking to is like, okay. But just about anybody else
Oh yeah.
come back at you with another Step Brothers quote, and then you're like, all right, we're bonding
No.
now.
Oh God. Like my absolute favorites from that movie are some of those involving the sleepwalking scenes.
Oh, oh yeah.
They're like, "Hey, you can't catch me. Or
I
where they're waking up from the sleepwalking scene
yes.
where I think it was John C. Riley was like, the clown has no penis.
Yeah. What are you dreaming about? And no, my cousin Matt, I spend a lot of time with him nowadays. A couple different times a week, I'll go over there, and they'll invite me over for dinner, and we'll watch football, we'll watch Family Guy or whatever else, and spend a lot of time with his kids. Well, when it's getting ready for Christmas time, I watched as we were just having this session wrapping presents, and they bought their son a pair of Hulk hands, and I immediately think of Step Brothers and Hulk hands. And my cousin Matt goes, when I saw those Hulk hands at Walmart, that was the sole reason why I needed to buy them for my son. Was I was thinking of Step Brothers.
Or if they got him a Chewbacca mask, and you'd be like, "It's okay, mine's not movie quality."
You see the smudge on this sword here? That's Randy Jackson from American Idol. Why'd you have him sign a sword? Well, I
You meet
met
him, you're not going
Randy
to have
Jackson, and you're not gonna not get an autograph, and all I had on me was this sword.
Oh God, yeah. Oh man, I could go on and on, but we'll go on to the next question here. Now, with some of the places you've gone with, with MWA or TAPW, those in MWA, they've been going to some different places, even some different states. TAPW is
Yep.
down in Kansas, right?
They're based out of Junction City, Kansas. Yep.
Junction City, Kansas. So those involve a little bit of a road trip there. What are some road trip must-haves for you?
I mean, it's more than anything, just I'd say be with the right people. But I mean, wrestling is such a brotherhood, especially in the independent scene, where you find more friends than you find. You hear from people in like WWE who've said over the years, "Oh, I I have many acquaintances, but very few friends," and you count on one hand how many actual friends you have through the wrestling business, and that's not the way it is for me. And I think maybe that's just the beauty of independent wrestling. But just finding those right people. One person I've only traveled with twice, as far as the road trip, was Mr. Fitness 2 from MWA, and that man's a veteran in the sport, and we were just sharing stories back and forth. And I'm not really a wrestler myself. We've shared different memories, so we'd reminisce, and then he would tell me all sorts of stories that I never heard before. But then I'd still be able to, from a wrestling standpoint, and he's a promoter himself too, so I'd be able to ask him questions about like just different ins and outs of the wrestling business. And some of those road stories you get, like that's the best training you can really get in wrestling. So really, it's travel with people, have the opportunity for those road stories, and that's more than you can ask for with anything else. Yeah, I mean, I love good music. The Steve and I travel together a lot, and good music is something that we both need to have. That those songs that we can sing along together, but the conversations are top most priority for me on the road.
Yeah, they say I have the voice of an angel by those that have heard me. I had to throw in another quote there.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I recognize it. Yeah. That your voice was a combination of Fergie and Jesus.
Jesus. Ah! Oh my God, I love it. All right. Now, I've seen this on Chris Van Vliet's podcast. I'm a huge fan of his.
Yeah.
But he does a thing at the end of a lot of his episodes where, gratefulness is such a huge part of everything. He tries to every day start and end it something he's grateful for. Most of the time, multiple. What are like two things that you're grateful for?
I mean, I think friendships for one. It is, and I have a vast array of friends from all sorts of walks of life, and just what friendship means to me. And it goes back to what I was talking about earlier with what I post on Facebook, and really trying to make others feel special and lift others up. But I mean, friendships is topmost priority. I don't know. I'm blessed to have a lot of friends, and I don't know. I say this, and it's such a cliche thing to say is I don't know where my life would be without this person. And the fact that I have so many people in my life that I could say that about, like,
Oh
really
yeah.
makes the world's difference to me.
Oh yeah. That is something. You, a lot of people can consider themselves lucky if they have like one or two people like that. But when
Yeah.
you can have multiple, that's something special.
And I mean, it's something I really, again, like I don't take it lightly. The fact it's so important to me to just make others feel loved and appreciated, and to build other people up, and because we all have those dark days, and we all have those
Mm-hmm.
dark moments, and we doubt our self worth, and just to be able to, whether you say it or not, just with the interactions you have with people that make them feel appreciated, where they realize it or not, like it just goes a long way, and it's a selfless thing to do. Like, I'm not looking, I don't look to build people up to build myself up. I want them to feel special and understand that I appreciate them, and it's not something where I'm like, hey, I just gave you a shout out, you need to like me more. It's nothing. I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care about what building up Johnny Cadillac as far as friendships are concerned. I want to build others up and make them know and really understand how much they're appreciated in life.
Definitely. That then it's great to have people like that out there because Lord knows there's enough people tearing each other down out there. So when you have people out there that'll do the exact opposite and build people up, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
Well, I can see that my son here is getting a little cranky, so he's probably due for a feeding. But I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me tonight. I wish you luck out
Yeah.
there, with the Jericho Cruise. Safe travels there. Wish you well with the Caddy Chat Wrestling Talk podcast. The stuff you have coming up with that, and also with MWA and TAPW. Everybody out there, if whenever you go to Facebook and you see that they are going to be having a show in your town, be sure to get out there and check it out, because if you are lucky enough to have a independent wrestling promotion in your area, that is a good thing. Go out and support them.
Absolutely. And I mean, thank you for the shout out. Thank you for the, appreciation. But specifically the shout out to Caddy Chat Wrestling Talk podcast. I want to say it was an honor for me to be on here on Drinking at Moe's, and I can't wait to have you guests on Caddy Chat Wrestling Talk podcast. So we have that to look forward to as well.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I look forward to making that happen once you get back from what sounds like going to be a good time on the 6th Jericho Cruise.
Thank you. Yeah,
right.
We'll make it happen for sure.
Oh yeah. See, here's what happens with this fucking